The Scarlet Monastery was one of the bastions of the Scarlet Crusade, an organisation whose sole purpose was to wipe out the undead. They made no distinction between the Scourge and the Forsaken, and would torture and kill anyone they felt wasn't completely aligned with their own mission. Welcome to the Archives of Warcraft, a series where we look at some of the original features of vanilla dungeons that still exist today, even though they aren't part of the content. If you're a newer player and wondered what they were for, this is the place for you. For other videos in the series, just click the annotation here or find it in the playlist for my channel. The Scarlet Monastery was an easy instance to get to if you were Horde, because it was very close to the Undercity and it was in a very low level, in fact the lowest of all level zones. But the instance was run roughly between level 30 and 40 from memory. Maybe a little bit below, maybe a little bit above. For Alliance, this was quite tricky. Not only was it well away from the nearest Alliance city, which was Ironforge, but getting there meant going through Western Plaguelands. Now, Western Plaguelands was an even higher level zone than it is now, and a little bit more dangerous. So the way I would get there was first of all to get to Chillwind Camp, and that was far enough away. If you hadn't been questing that area at the time, and the first time you go there you wouldn't have been. So that was a long trek through some roads with high level mobs either side of you. Then I would run towards the little lake area on the far western side of it, swim across. There might be a couple of bears over there that would be very high level. You certainly wouldn't be taking them on if you were at the lower end of that bracket when you could be going into Scarlet Monastery. Then, after you dodged those, you'd come across this area here. Now, it wasn't as built up as it is now, but it was still a narrow passage you'd have to get through with high level Horde PvP enabled NPCs on either side of it, and all they had to do was hit you and you'd become PvP enabled. Of course, you might be on a PvP zone, it wouldn't matter. So the potential for being ganked was huge. So you'd run through this and then have to run. Note, no horsey back then unless you'd already reached level 40, and you'd have to run all the way to the Scarlet Monastery through Horde territory before you even got to the dungeon. This is a very special set of dungeons in the memories of players around during vanilla, I think. Although they were very far from high-level dungeons, people still ran them a lot for various reasons. The dungeon is currently divided into two parts, but originally it was in four: the library, the graveyard, the armory and the cathedral. The graveyard and library could be accessed through the two dungeon portals that you see now. The other two parts needed to be accessed by opening these doors first. For this you would need the Scarlet Key, obtained from the library. I mentioned this key right at the start of the series because it also opened the door to the Scarlet Bastion within Strathome. When we enter the graveyard now, we appear straight in the graveyard itself, but there used to be a torture chamber we'd run through first. This contained a boss which dropped a fist weapon, something I think that was quite rare at the time, certainly at that level. He could also drop daggers that looked like red hot pokers. In the graveyard section there were a number of possible rare bosses. You might also recognise this area from the Headless Horseman event in autumn. In fact, this event takes place in a much less modified version of the original graveyard area than what we see here. There was a final boss just here which dropped reasonable offhand. The bosses here tended to drop green quality items as I recall. They were upgraded to blue in a later expansion. The main reason for coming here was actually much later, when it was a good place for a well-equipped level 60 to solo farm Fadeleaf and Kingsblood. From memory, these were needed for the shadow protection potions that I used to use for Loatheb in the original Naxxramas. The library was the other wing that could be accessed without the key. It contained two bosses, a Houndmaster, though not the same as the current version, and a mage in the library itself. The Houndmaster was a popular boss as it could drop a dog whistle that summoned a combat pet for a short time for you. You could actually miss out this boss as I recall, but I don't think anybody did. Arcanistone, the boss at the end of the instance, could drop a hugely desirable epic ring. It was the first epic, as far as I can recall, that you could get your grubby little hands on that wasn't bind on equip, in other words a world drop. There was also a chest in the room where you could loot the Scarlet Key, no longer visible. You can also see this character in Old Hillsbrad during the scene with the crystal, which eventually goes on to be formed into the Ashbringer. Of course, it wouldn't have had much significance if you didn't have at least one quest which required you to nick a book from here, and they certainly did exist. But what I notice now is an absence of something. In the original World of Warcraft, it was common to have books in various locations around the world that would explain much of the background lore. A lot of what I know that I didn't get from the original Warcraft games, I got from these books. These don't seem to be a feature of more recent expansions, and even older revamped zones have them missing. It'll be no surprise that there were a number of them in the Scarlet Library, but I can't see any of them now. A bit of a shame, really. The armoury is now sandwiched between what were the two parts of the library wing, but used to be accessed through one of the doors that now looks just like background scenery. You needed the Scarlet Key to do this, which was obtained from the library. It contained an outdoor cloister area, and then the weapon training section we can see now. Like most parts of the dungeon, it was mostly trash until the end. It had one boss, Herod. He was behind a locked door, which again needed the Scarlet Key for some reason. I have no idea about the reason for that, given that you needed the key to get in. But it's now open, and with a different boss inside. When you killed him, loads of low health Scarlet fanatics would rush in, so you'd have to gather up and AoE them down. It was not uncommon for inexperienced healers, or even some ranged, to be at the top so as not to get in the way of the whirlwind ability from the boss, but then get mugged by these fanatics if they didn't drop down quickly enough. They had a very small chance to drop the Scarlet Tabard, now unobtainable. Herod is yet another character you can see from the earlier days in Old Hillsbrad, where he's a small boy known as Herod the Bully. The cathedral was the highest level part and again needed the Scarlet Key to access it. Like all locks, however, you could bypass this with a rogue or similar, but it wasn't the most difficult key in the game to obtain after all. The only bosses were right at the end, so it was mostly a trash fest. At the end, you had a Scarlet Knight who falls to you and is then resurrected by Whitemane, who bursts through the door at the back. All of this is much as now. However, instead of Commander Durand, as it was now, it was Reno Mograine. This was the elder son of Alexandros Mograine, otherwise known as the Ashbringer. He's also the older brother, or was, of Darian Mograine, now commander of the Death Knights of Acheris. He was lured into killing his father with the promise of power, with his own blade, and so became High Lord. Although we appeared to kill him, he was back again for the corrupted Ashbringer event that used to be triggered if you entered the old version of the Scarlet Monastery with this sword. This was obtainable from the original Naxxramas from the later to become Death Knight Darian Mograine. The soul of Alexandros kills his son in revenge for the earlier act of betrayal. Not that Alexandros was the only paladin to have a son taken in by the Scarlet Crusade. The Scarlet Crusade could actually be considered to be what the Knights of the Silver Hand would be if they abandoned all sense of morality. The final boss in Scarlet Monastery was one often missed. In an antechamber there is a sconce which opens up a secret door to High Inquisitor Fairbanks, an undead priest. A somewhat strange place to find a member of the undead who is not being killed without question. He was witness to Alexandros' murder by his own son as he was pretending to be dead during a Scourge ambush. It was he who told members of the Scarlet Monastery in Tirisfal about this, some of whom broke away and formed the Argent Dawn, another organisation which no longer exists now but was based at Light's Hope Chapel. He was murdered by some of the more zealous members of the monastery, presumably those who went on to form the Scarlet Crusade, and this is where we found him during vanilla times. He also had a part to play in the corrupted Ashbringer event. Now he just seems to be dead, somehow suggesting that the corrupted Ashbringer event never really happened in the official lore. Seems a little odd. So that's the Scarlet Monastery and the significance of features from vanilla, no longer active now, but sometimes still visible. So if you've enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, especially if you want to see further episodes in this series. If you want to see some of the older episodes in the series, there's now a good number of them, then click on this annotation, that will take you to them, and check out some of my other videos as well, see what you like, and until next time, I'll see you later.